Every 40,000 list gives you Calgar, Dante, and Grimnar, and every time the comments explode with the same three names: Tushan, Tyberos, Asterion Moloc. Today we're covering the chapter masters that actually terrify the people who know the lore. And know the lore doesn't mean skimming a Fandom wiki page and hitting record. It means citing page numbers in comment sections, naming the novelist, and spending years begging creators to cover characters whose stories are richer, darker, and more morally complex than anything populating the standard lists, only to watch the same reheated Calgar summary drop for the 10th time. The most interesting chapter masters in 40K aren't the famous ones. They're the ones that require cracking open an actual novel, and the creators making your top 10 lists stopped reading at the wiki summary. 3 names. 3 characters the mainstream has either ignored, fumbled, or gotten outright wrong. Starting with the chapter master who earned this video's title with his fists. Tushan, chapter master of the Salamanders. Among the roughly 1,000 chapters of Space Marines scattered across the Imperium of Man, the Salamanders stand as an anomaly. One of the original first founding chapters, descended from the Primarch Vulcan, they define themselves through something the 41st millennium has beaten out of nearly everyone else in the galaxy: compassion. Structural, institutional compassion, not a paragraph in their founding charter that everyone quietly ignores, but the organizing principle behind how they recruit, how they train, how they govern, and how they wage war. Their homeworld of Nocturne is a volcanic death trap. Unlike virtually every other chapter that retreats to isolated fortress monasteries between campaigns, these Astartes live among families. They maintain bonds with the civilian population between deployments. Lexicanum describes Tushan as the very embodiment of the Salamander's ideals of compassion, duty, and self-sacrifice. In the grim darkness of the far future, where scholars have documented the Imperium's right-wing totalitarian structure and systematic dehumanization of its own citizens, a chapter master defined by compassion is practically committing sedition by existing. His ideology is the most dangerous thing about him. In a galaxy running on fascistic indifference to human suffering, the belief that civilians matter is a radical act. That worldview is non-negotiable context for what happened on Armageddon. Armageddon, a hive world synonymous with apocalyptic warfare in Warhammer 40,000 fiction. Multiple orc invasions of staggering scale under warlord Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka have scarred the planet across decades of conflict. Wars so massive they carry their own formal designation: the Wars for Armageddon. During those campaigns, multiple Space Marine chapters deployed alongside Imperial Guard regiments, fighting across ash wastes, manufactorum complexes, and labyrinthine hive cities housing billions of human souls. Tushan brought the Salamanders, and fighting on the same planet, wearing the same Imperial heraldry, answering the same mobilization orders, were the Marines Malevolent. The Marines Malevolent serve the Emperor. They kill his enemies. Loyalist insignia marks their battle plate, and they deploy against the same threats as every Astartes chapter in the Imperium's arsenal. None of that translates into valuing human life. Collateral damage doesn't register in their operational calculus. Civilians aren't an unfortunate cost of war to these Marines, but background noise, statistically negligible, beneath mention in post-engagement reports. They occupy a unique and despised position in the 40K setting. Loyalist Space Marines who technically serve humanity while treating actual humans as consumable terrain features. On Armageddon, that institutional contempt produced the act that cemented their reputation and set the stage for one of the most emotionally charged scenes in the entire lore. Captain Vinyar of the Marines Malevolent ordered a whirlwind artillery bombardment directly onto the Emperor's Deliverance, a refugee camp packed with thousands of displaced civilians during an orc assault on the position. Whirlwinds are self-propelled artillery platforms firing vengeance missiles, high explosive warheads engineered to obliterate massed infantry formations. Vinyar aimed them through the camp. Orcs were assaulting the position. Civilians occupied the same ground. And in Vinyar's judgment, removing both was faster than distinguishing between them. Men, women, and children who had fled the destruction of their homes, who had gathered under what they believed was imperial protection, behind lines held by the emperor's own angels of death, were shredded by ordnance fired by their supposed defenders. Thousands dead. Refugees who survived an orc invasion of their hive only to die under the munitions of humanity's genetically engineered protectors. The orcs caught in the bombardment died too, certainly, but the bill was paid overwhelmingly in human blood that Captain Vinyar didn't bother tallying. His decision was tactical, deliberate, and in an imperium that counts its populations in billions and measures its wars in centuries, it was exactly the kind of atrocity that gets buried in after-action files nobody opens. Tu Shan opened it. He confronted Captain Vinyar after the bombardment of Emperor's Deliverance. No closed doors, no diplomatically worded reprimands filtered through official channels, or carefully sanitized by staff officers concerned about interchapter relations. The chapter master of the Salamanders beat the Marines' malevolent captain nearly to death, in front of command staff, publicly, as an act of judgment that nobody present could misinterpret. Tu Shan looked at a fellow officer wearing the same power armor, carrying the same genetic legacy of the Emperor's own design, and concluded that what Vinyar had done to those refugees made him functionally indistinguishable from the orcs they'd both been deployed to fight. Violence between chapters risks inquisitorial investigation. It risks formal censure, potential declarations of excommunication, the full apparatus of imperial oversight descending on both organizations. Tu Shan accepted every one of those consequences the moment his fists connected with Vinyar's face. Those strikes carried the weight of a moral principle the 41st millennium has otherwise ground to powder. Compassion, in the grim darkness of the far future, doesn't arrive wrapped in diplomatic language or tearful appeals. For the chapter master of the Salamanders, it arrived as blunt force trauma, administered to a man who'd forgotten what the armor was forged to protect. Community engagement data on this scene tells its own story. Tu Shan generates individual engagement scores of 1,116, nearly double what the next most popular overlooked chapter master achieves in discussion forums and comment sections. That concentration of passion comes from a smaller but deeply invested readership, people who refuse to accept that the setting is pure nihilism. They gravitate toward moments where characters make choices that carry genuine cost, where the galaxy's darkness amplifies acts of decency rather than erasing them. Tu Shan punishing Vinyar validates an entire interpretation of Warhammer 40,000. Yes, this galaxy is terrible, and most people in it have been ground into indifference or active cruelty. But someone still remembers what the fighting was supposed to be for. Someone still counts the dead civilians. Someone still holds the killers accountable, even when those killers wear the same Aquila on their chest. Armageddon proved Tu Shan's moral conviction. Nocturne proved what his body could absorb. During a battle against Chaos forces on the Salamander's volcanic homeworld, Tu Shan's Land Raider Promethean was torn apart around him. The explosion ejected the chapter master from the vehicle and collapsed tons of ceramite and adamantium wreckage onto his body, crushing his leg beneath the ruin of his own transport. On an active battlefield, immobility is a death sentence with a short fuse, especially when the ground is crawling with Chaos Terminators. Traitor Astartes encased in tactical dreadnought armor, enhanced by the corrupting gifts of the Chaos Gods, carrying millennia of unbroken combat experience stretching back to the Horus Heresy. Each one is elite heavy infantry of the Traitor Legions, lethal to a loyalist marine at full strength. Tu Shan wasn't at full effectiveness. He was pinned under a wrecked vehicle with a shattered leg. He fought them from his back. Trapped beneath the blown-out carcass of his own Land Raider, unable to stand, unable to retreat, unable to do anything except swing at the traitors closing in around him, Tu Shan engaged Chaos Terminators in close combat from the wreckage. broken beneath his own vehicle, striking at enemies that would threaten him at full strength, refusing to let the mathematics of his situation write the final line. Engagement data on this specific scene ranks among the highest in the entire Tushan discussion corpus. The resonance is visceral and immediate. A man with a crushed leg fighting enemies who should kill him easily, surviving through something beyond physical capability. Nocturne demanded more. In a separate engagement on the same world, Tushan faced a demonic entity of such magnitude that conventional weapons failed against it. A demon dragon, raw warp energy given monstrous physical form. The creature threatened to overrun the salamander's defensive positions entirely, and Tushan made a decision that redefined self-sacrifice even by Astartes standards. He called an orbital bombardment directly onto his own coordinates. Orbital strikes are weapons of last resort designed to obliterate hardened fortifications and armored columns. Blast radius measured in hundreds of meters. Everything inside that radius ceases to exist. Ceramite, flesh, demon stuff, and the volcanic rock beneath all of it, vaporized into nothing. Tushan called it down on his own head, wagered that his armor, his Astartes biology, and whatever force watches over the sons of Vulcan would carry him through the annihilation he just ordered. He walked out of the crater. The demon didn't. Games Workshop's Black Library publishing arm invested directly in this character's narrative future. They commissioned Burden of Angels, a short story built around the alliance between Tushan and Commander Dante of the Blood Angels, set on the anniversary of their partnership forged on Armageddon's killing fields. A standalone work exploring a chapter master's relationships, moral convictions, and emotional arcs, funded and distributed by the official fiction arm of the company that owns the entire Warhammer 40,000 setting. Tushan has thematic depth the publisher treats as commercially viable. He has friendships with other protagonist-tier characters that span campaigns and decades. He has scars, both physical and philosophical, that the fiction tracks across multiple appearances. Even chapter masters who populate every standard ranking have hidden layers that surface-level coverage misses completely. Logan Grimnar, Great Wolf of the Space Wolves, a permanent fixture on generic lists, has a novel scene where he sprints in full Terminator plate. Tactical dreadnought armor is notoriously heavy, notoriously mobility-limiting. The suit's design philosophy trades all speed for near-total protection, and standard Astartes wearing it move at a deliberate walk. Grimnar ran at full sprint, a display of superhuman physicality that lives exclusively in the novels, invisible to anyone whose research ends at the wiki summary. If even the famous pics carry moments like that buried in their source material, the overlooked pics have entire geological strata waiting underneath. And the next stratum drops into something colder, quieter, and far more predatory than righteous fury. Tyberos the Red Wake, chapter master of the Carcharodons. Where Tushan weaponizes compassion, Tyberos embodies apex predation elevated into a philosophy of command. His chapter, the Carcharodons, named for Carcharodon, the genus of the great white shark, operates as a fleet-based force locked in self-imposed exile beyond the outermost boundaries of imperial space, in the region known simply as the Outer Dark. Their origins are deliberately obscured even by the standards of a setting that thrives on ambiguity. When the Carcharodons surface from the Outer Dark to wage war in imperial space, the ferocity of their methods unsettles allied Astartes chapters fighting alongside them. When they finish, they vanish back into the void, like their namesake dropping below the thermocline, gone without ceremony, owing nothing to anyone left on the surface. Tyberos himself is described as a giant, even for a space marine, so large that standard Terminator armor, already a hulking suit of powered plate designed for the biggest warriors in any given chapter, had to be specially modified to contain his frame. Unhelmed, his face presents a corpse-white nightmare, half the bones of his face exposed in a bloodless grimace above soulless black eyes. Picture that visage appearing in the breach of a boarded starship, backlit by emergency lighting, wreathed in the acrid smoke pouring from ruptured conduits, framed by the silhouette of armor too large for any standard template to produce. His chapter chose their name well. He wields paired weapons called Hunger and Slake, lightning claws whose inner jaws house mechanized chain blades, creating a hybrid between traditional lightning claws and chain fists capable of shearing through both infantry and armored bulkheads. Tyberos won these weapons by defeating Nehat Nev, chapter master of the Ashen Claws, in single combat, a duel that simultaneously established the Red Wake's dominance and forged a fragile alliance between the Carcharodons and the renegade chapter. His primary armaments were pried from a rival chapter master's hands. Speeches and moral example have no currency in the Carcharodons' command structure. Tyberos leads through permanent, demonstrated proof that he is the deadliest organism in whatever space he currently occupies. Robbie McNiven's novels Red Tithe and Outer Dark provide the most detailed descriptions of Tyberos and the Carcharodons' void-born operations. These are the primary texts, the books any honest discussion of this character must draw from, and both novels contain something conspicuously, verifiably absent from their pages: any mention whatsoever of dreadnought-grade cybernetic components in Tyberos's body. The community widely believes, and multiple content creators have confidently stated as fact, that Tyberos has dreadnought parts grafted into his frame. Various versions of the claim circulate across forums, lore videos, and comment sections. He's so enormous, so heavily augmented, that components from a dreadnought chassis have been physically integrated into his body to sustain or enhance him. Creators with audiences of tens of thousands have repeated this as established canon. Zero primary sources support it. No novel describes it. No passage implies it. Not one line in Red Tithe. Not one line in Outer Dark. What McNiven's texts actually describe is heavily modified Terminator armor reinforced with brass bonding studs and adamantium rods. Extraordinary war gear, custom forged for a warrior whose physical dimensions exceed standard Astartes tolerances so dramatically that mass-produced equipment simply can't contain him. That's remarkable by any measure, but it's categorically distinct from dreadnought technology. A dreadnought is a life support sarcophagus wired into a bipedal war machine, piloted by the neural impulses of a nearly dead Marine sealed within the chassis. Claiming Tyberos has dreadnought parts confuses two entirely separate technology trees in the 40K setting. And the confusion has persisted because the information chain never encounters a single checkpoint. Fan speculation seeds a wiki edit. The wiki edit feeds a YouTube script. The YouTube script gets cited by the next wiki revision. And at no point in that loop does anyone open Outer Dark and verify what McNiven actually wrote. The community friction score on this claim runs at 0.9, meaning near universal disagreement erupts whenever someone states or challenges it. Comments catch fire. Corrections are issued, contested, defended with citations that trace back to other unchecked secondary sources. That friction is productive because every commenter who digs deep enough eventually hits the primary text. And the primary text is unambiguous. Brass bonding studs, adamantium rods, modified Terminator plate, no dreadnought components, no sarcophagus integration, no cybernetic grafts from a walking tomb. If your last source on Tyberos was a lore video, your information is contaminated. Tyberos, for all his ferocity, has answers. He's enormous. His armor is modified. He killed a rival chapter master and took his weapons. His face looks like a skull wearing skin as an afterthought. Disturbing facts, certainly, but knowable within the logic of the setting. Explicable. Asterion Moloc doesn't give you that luxury. The chapter master of the Minotaurs is the point where knowable facts thin to almost nothing, and what remains underneath is genuinely unsettling. On paper, the Minotaurs are a loyalist space marine chapter bound by the same oaths of service as every other Astartes organization. In practice, they function as the personal attack dogs of the High Lords of Terra, the Council of 12 that governs the Imperium in the Emperor's stead. When the High Lords need a loyalist chapter brought to heel, the Minotaurs receive the deployment order. During the Badab War, a civil conflict between loyalist Space Marine chapters, Moloc led the Minotaurs in a 17-hour ship-to-ship battle aboard the vessel Optera 5 that nearly annihilated the Lamenters chapter, a cursed Blood Angel's successor, perpetually hounded by catastrophic misfortune, whose only crime was choosing the losing side in a conflict where neither side held the moral high ground. 17 hours of corridor-by-corridor slaughter through a starship's intestinal passages, and at the end, a chapter that had already suffered enough tragedy for 10 chapters worth of history ground to the edge of extinction. A state-sanctioned death squad handed a fleet and a gene line. Moloc sits at the center of that apparatus, and everything about him resists the kind of explanation that satisfies a rational mind. His exact nature remains, by apparent authorial design, unresolved. The lore declines to confirm whether Moloc is a conventional Astartes who has served for an improbably long time, or something fundamentally different wearing an Astartes shape. Characters within the fiction itself, trying to articulate what sets him apart, have called him a machine or an automaton that just keeps on coming. He carries the Black Star and radiates an aura of wrongness that even other Astartes find difficult to articulate. His combat record, documented primarily in Forge World's Imperial Armor supplements rather than mainstream Black Library novels, reads as clinical and devastating across every entry. Destruction delivered with mechanical consistency. He arrives, executes with mechanical precision, and withdraws. That source distribution explains a significant piece of his obscurity. Imperial Armor volumes are supplementary publications from Forge World, specialist tier material within the already specialized world of Warhammer 40,000 lore. Accessing Moloc's story requires buying those books, reading them cover to cover, and synthesizing material that doesn't arrive pre-formatted in a wiki entry someone else already summarized. The most unsettling chapter master in the entire setting has been hiding behind a paywall of both money and effort for years. Theories about his true nature fracture the lore community along two primary fault lines. One camp holds that Asterion Moloc isn't an individual at all, but a designation, a title under which multiple Astartes have served over the centuries, replacing each other without discontinuity. Under this theory, there is no man inside the armor. There is a function wearing a name across centuries, maintained through controlled succession in which each bearer replaces the last without discontinuity. The second camp argues Moloc was purpose-built from the start, constructed by the High Lords using forbidden technology, a living instrument of political control fitted into ceramite armor and pointed at problems. Under this reading, he was manufactured to specification, optimized from inception for exactly the role he occupies. Games Workshop has confirmed nothing about Moloc, denied nothing. They maintain his ambiguity with a precision that looks engineered, releasing through Forge World supplements just enough material to sustain speculation, never enough to collapse the uncertainty into a definitive answer. His omission from mainstream chapter master content generates a friction score of 0.9, near unanimous frustration among viewers who recognize the name. Raw engagement sits at 85, drastically lower than Tushan's 1116, below Tyberos' 625. Asterion Moloc is the deep cut that separates readers from skimmers, the character whose name functions as a shibboleth within the lore community. Knowing his weapons, his operational pattern, and the theories surrounding his nature puts you in a vanishingly small percentage of 40,000 viewers. The information has been available for years, sitting in Forge World's Imperial Armor volumes, waiting for someone to bring it to the audience that's been asking. 3 chapter masters. One enforces morality with his bare hands against a fellow officer who ordered the massacre of refugees at Emperor's Deliverance. A second requires custom-forged Terminator plate because nothing off the rack can contain him, and the most persistent claim about his body has zero support in any novel Robbie McNiven ever wrote. A third radiates an aura of wrongness that even other Astartes find difficult to articulate, carries a weapon called the Black Star, and may not be a single human being at all. Tushan's fists landing on Vinyar, brass bonding studs and adamantium rods on Tyberos. Never dreadnought components, not on any page of any book. Sealed Imperial armor records, where Moloc's true nature hides behind Forge World's price tag and the Imperium's own classified archives. Every one of those details required opening a book. Every one was available for years. Every one got skipped by creators who decided you weren't worth the effort. You were. And if you think these three were obscure, we haven't even started. Subscribe. The deep cuts only get deeper from here.